Welcome to Conseil's Voice of the Diaspora. This is a brand new edition of Explore Your Past with Mustafa Kureyşi. I'm your host, Mustafa Kureyşi. Together, we'll be delving into the history of our green island, Cyprus. Today, we're very fortunate to have a legend from the British Turkish Cypriot community. And I'm fortunate enough to call him my friend as well, Mr. İsmail Veli. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. Perhaps legend is a little bit stretched, but I'll accept it in good grace.
Well, it's an honor to have you on.
Thank you.
How are you?
I'm fine. I'm very well. Thank you very much. And as I said, it's an honor for me to actually be interviewed by you regarding this particular subject, which is close to my heart.
Yes, absolutely. Now, I'm sure you need no introduction, but for those of you who've not had the pleasure, could you give a brief introduction as to who you are, where you was born, where you was raised, a bit of about your activities and with the community as well?
I was actually born in Lurigina, Akıncılar, in 1956. My family came to the UK in 1962. We grew up in London around Caledonian Highbury area. I always had a passion for history and research, and I was fortunate enough to have a library very close to my home and school, where I went in 1962 to 69. And it was something that I was not accustomed to in Lurigina. I'd never seen a book in my life, so I was completely overawed by the library, and I've never stopped reading and studying since. And I have many other hobbies. I do a lot of figures, for example, reenacting historical battles and so on, which is another part of history that I enjoy, not the vicious side of it, but the events. And it keeps me busy.
Yeah. And how about some of your activities within the community? I know you have been very active in supporting various causes to support the Turkish Cypriots, be it in the diaspora or in Cyprus itself. Could you tell us a bit about your past activities?
Well, I think I initially started off in embargo because I believe passionately in human rights, first of all, and that was my only aim. I did not want to get involved in the political aspect of North. So we have enough political groups, which is fair enough. Horses for courses, as they say. And my ambition was to try and share some of the information and archive information which I had acquired over the years on the Cyprus issue, so we could look at a lot more objectively and hope to encourage younger people to try and learn about the Cyprus problem, which has been paramount in our lives, all our lives, to be honest with you, perhaps a bit too much. And I don't like to give a biased form of history, as I often look at many different sources, including Greek, English and Turkish. Obviously my aim was to try and lift the embargoes on the Turkish Cypriots so our youth in particular can lead the kind of normal life in sports and economic activities that we were deprived of when I was young.
Yeah. And I know certainly, particularly I'm speaking as a historian here, for the past 10 years, you have done incredible research into the origins of the villages from Lurigina. And it's culminated in volumes of research, and we'll be going through these later on, hopefully. But could you share a bit about your findings regarding the origins of the Lurigina villages?
Well, when I was growing up, all I could hear was that from my families, we were part Arabic origin, and others we must have been Greeks and converted to Islam, which is all fine in itself and so on. However, facts quite often do not equate to mythology and gossip around the family. So I was determined to find out, especially after I became a grandfather myself, and I'm a multicultural family. My grandchildren are half Pakistani and Muslim and half Turkish. So I wanted to leave some kind of information on my roots to my grandchildren for future generations. So I set out to find out the real facts of my roots, who we are, where we come from, and where we actually ended up. Many people try to discourage that there are no such archives left in Cyprus and blah, blah, blah. Well, I thought nothing ventured, nothing gained. So I had to do it. Initially, of course, I went all over London and interviewed all the old timers in order to record their families, their roots, and so on. I began to build up a reasonable amount of family tree, and I found that far from being just my family tree, the whole village was obviously interconnected. Right. So it led to the whole village. In the end, after about 3-4 years, I was determined to actually say, I can't do it anymore from ordinary personal people and contacts. I now need to go to the archives. Again, many people said that you're not going to find anything. Well, lo and behold, I did actually go to the Kyrene Milli Arşiv and Araştırma Derneği. I met a lovely lady, Esin Hanım there, who was an Ottoman translator. And they found the 78-79 last Ottoman census, which was due to be passed over to the British colonial government. And the Ottomans decided to do a very comprehensive and include the women for a change. And it included their date of births, it included when they married, and even how many plots of land each one had with the reference numbers, and even who done their national service, and even how much tax, and also how many animals they had. Even goats, sheep, and mules and donkeys were all listed. I was completely shocked. Obviously, that went back to the late 1700s, so I was determined from there on. I couldn't find anything more in Kyrenia. So I asked for advice if I could go back further. They did advise me that the National Ottoman Institute or National Archive Institute in Istanbul did have a lot more documents. So they gave me the reference numbers. And I was also fortunate enough to have a Greek friend in Australia who was also searching his roots. But while doing that, he came across a few reference numbers on documents of Lurigina in Istanbul. Obviously, I gave him some document numbers and reference numbers for Kyrenia, and he gave me Istanbul. And as the researcher went to Istanbul, I gave him a small fee, obviously, and he brought the documents back to Kyrenia of the 1831 and 1833 census plus the property census. And lo and behold, I finally managed to find out exactly when my roots came to the village and, what professions they originally had. And I was shocked to find that most of them were actually settled around that particular time, contrary to popular belief that we were originated from the Latins. And obviously, I don't know when my roots came there, where they came from before, and I don't know. But it was very well recorded that there were elite cavalrymen, feudal cavalry, who controlled the land and collected taxes, and administrators were also sent there. I was quite shocked to find that nothing that I had been told in my lifetime actually suited the facts. And in addition, I had an advantage that I had the distant relative from the Kavaz family, Alper Mehmet, who was the first British ambassador to the UK government in Iceland. He had a relative, Ibrahim Taksildar. Taksildar in English is a tax collector, is an old word for tax. He had records of some of our roots from the late 1700s. And when I compared those to the Ottoman archives, it all matched. Obviously, the man was born in 1890, was a very well-educated person, had access to tax records. So by piecing all this information together, I've managed to accumulate the database over 8,000 individuals going back 10, 11 generations. I'm saying over 8,000. This was about 4 years ago. Admittedly, I haven't added on a lot since then. And the only way I could have actually done that was by setting up a website 10 years ago, which was about 3-4 years after I began the research. Because when people logged in and checked for Lurigina, then hopefully this was the hope that they would find my website, and it was an invitation to people to send me information on their relatives and roots, because the Lurigina population is spread across the globe, like all Cypriots. And I've been fortunate that I've had massive support from many people. And it's not just Lurigina. This is an example of what other Turkish Cypriots, or Greek Cypriots for that matter, can do with their connection. And I think a lot of people will be surprised when I tell them that many Greek Cypriots have actually gone to Istanbul on account of my website. They've contacted me to search for their roots, and they've come back and written a mail to me thanking me. This is one way of getting through to them that is devoid of politics, but we all have a common interest, that is to search for our roots.
Yes.
And it encouraged many of them. As a result, I have made many friends. They've also sent me information, what they found on their Greek archives as regards Lurigina and vice versa. So getting on with people can have benefits, but of course I'm proud of my heritage. I'm proud of my identity. It doesn't have to be at the expense of anybody else. I don't have to slag off some other community just to enhance my own beliefs. In fact, I believe it's against our culture and our religion to actually slag off other people, although most of us do, unfortunately, in propaganda, that's something that is between you and God, the belief. But I firmly believe that as a human being, we need to respect everybody, providing, of course, they respect our identity and our unique culture in addition.
Absolutely. And you mentioned that in our religion, there is no racism or discrimination based on one's ethnicity. It brings to mind a verse from the Quran in which it says that God has made us into nations so that we may get to know each other. But unfortunately, in this times, we seem to think that differences are somehow an excuse to be enemies with each other. And that's really a sad state of affairs. But as you said, devoid of the politics, our love for Cyprus and our passion to search for our roots has actually brought you close with Greek Cypriots and other members of other communities as well. So that's really fantastic.
Well, I believe it's very important because although I have to admit publicly, I'm not particularly greatly religious myself. I respect one of my sons is very religious, and I love and respect him for that. However, it's not the religion that makes bigots and racists out of people. It's people who make bigots and racists. It's not the religion.
It's a mindset, isn't it?
Yes, it's a mindset of the individual, and quite often it's an upbringing. I'm a very mixed, multicultural family. I embrace and admit that I do have distant Greek relatives who actually converted to Christianity because of my uncles and, going back in the late 1800s. And I've actually connected and I've found out who they are, and they're quite wealthy actually in the South. Unfortunately, they weren't very interested in getting to know them because there is a stigma amongst the Greeks. If you have a Turkish grandfather, I have I had quite a few relatives who actually converted in the late 1800s. That's a subject for another day. However, I embrace everybody, and I do believe that we are part of an extended human family. But having said that, I draw the line because I'm very proud of my cultural, historical, and ethnic heritage, which is what I am today. And this is why I want to leave a record for my future grandchildren to know where their roots originated from.
Exactly.
And this has been my sole purpose, full stop.
So, I mean, as you said, we can respect and admire the various cultures that are out there, but in doing so, we also are showing respect and admiration for our own culture, the Turkish culture of Cyprus. And from what you're telling me, you have relatives who have Turkish roots living on the Greek Cypriot side now. And because of the current climate or the rise in far-right politics in the South, obviously there's a stigma attached, and they may not feel comfortable in admitting that they have Turkish roots.
I understand their concerns, obviously, because they are living within their own community. But what I find extraordinary is they have actually kept the surnames and the nicknames of our families going. For example, in Anglicides, where the Katsura family is originally part of my father's maternal roots. Strangely enough, is also Mustafa Akıncılar, president of Cyprus, is also part of the Mehmet Said family tree. And I do know they live in Anglicides, and they actually own the McDonald's franchise in Larnaca, and are a wealthy family. Andreas, the owner of the actual McDonald's, he knows of his Turkish heritage, and he also knows that his roots in Lurigina, but unfortunately his brother can't quite remember his name now.
He's in denial, is he?
He's in denial. He knows, but he doesn't like talking about it, although his sister's okay. I wrote to the Kavaz family of my roots in Limassol, to 4 of them. I haven't had a response. It's not to interfere in their lives. It's just to connect, to embrace different various. Because even if I go to the far sides of the world, I will introduce my own Turkish Cypriot culture and heritage in a positive way. And if some of them happen to know that there's a problem out there, I'll steer clear. Because for me to go to a country, for example, like Chile or Brazil or Canada, and start criticizing another ethnic group in Cyprus, and we know the problems, we have enough of it as it is, it's going to undermine my own credibility when I'm introducing my culture. I'm trying to introduce my culture and ethnicity in a positive way, because it's amazing how many people you meet across the globe that don't even know where Cyprus is.
That's right.
Now, listeners may find this is surprising, but how many of us know some of the names in the Spanish islands, which is also in the Mediterranean? Do we know what problems, for example, the people in Corsica have with France? A lot of us don't. In fact, we live in the UK, and a lot of Turkish Cypriots don't even know what the problem in Northern Ireland is about. So why are we shocked when you go to places like Hawaii or Peru and they say, Cyprus, where's that?
Yeah. And you mentioned about being a positive ambassador, and I can't agree with you enough with that statement. And another thing you mentioned about the Kavaz family, there's many members of the Kavaz family from Cyprus, and the Greek side, they're known as Kavazi.
Yes.
And Kavaz, for those who don't know, is an Ottoman word for Ottoman guards.
Yes.
Are known as Kavaz.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. It's amazing how my great uncle Arif Pasha, he was a Pasha, and he was from the Kavaz family. He was Arif Mehmet Pasha Kavaz. They kept it. But I think quite rightly, I mean, when you're speaking in Greek, and I do speak Greek, I understand why there is a slight twist on because when they call me, they don't call me Ismail, they call me Ismaili. Or if my son is Mehmet, they call him Mehmeti. They always seem to add on the I. That's their, that's their language, which is fair enough. So Kavaz became Kavazi. I do have a Greek Cypriot police researcher friend in Limassol. We exchange a lot of ideas and archive information. And when I asked him to look into the Kavaz family, I know they have lots of shops and businesses out there. He actually found on the database that there was 600 Kavaz. Now, some people say, well, that doesn't mean that they're all related to you. No, I'm not saying that at all. However, when I looked into my first roots in Cyprus, Mehmet Kadri, for example, from the Kavaz family, he came to Lurigina 30 years ago. There's 1,600 people just from that one individual with his wife. Now, this Kavaz family, we had some in Dali as well, the village of Dali, and 3 of them from the Kavaz family became Christians, and so did Arif Pasha in Nicosia. Now, that's 4 of them. So is it impossible to appreciate that at least half of those Kavazis are actually have connections to my roots? No, it's not impossible, but that's fine. I'm not doing it as a political or any point. I'm simply in search of my roots, and I want to know the facts, and I want to see the ethnic makeup of Cyprus, not in any prejudicial terms, but in historical terms, because once I leave that subject, to me, it's history. It's nothing to do with politics.
Yes.
And I definitely wouldn't want to mix it into politics either.
You mentioned you have a great-grandfather, Kadri Effendi?
Yes.
Yes. Is that anything to do with the Kadri Tariqa? Or?
Yes, he was a member of the Kadiriya, and that's the grandfather of the Kavaz family. And when I met Ottoman, obviously, initially, when I found out that his name was Mehmet Kadri, I didn't realize the significance. I actually assumed it was just a name, although nobody else has that name except as a surname now. But I met an Ottoman a doctor in Kyrenia when they were going to give a lecture they were visiting the archives before they'd done it in Near East University lectures, and I actually went to that. And he said that he studied in Cyprus as well, and I told him that I had a relative named Mehmet Kadri. And without saying any more, he turned around to his colleague, who was also a lecturer, and he said, "Oh, he belonged to the order of the Qadiriya." Yeah. And I said, "What does that imply?" He said, "Well, people who carried the name Qadri meant that they belonged to the Sufi order of the Qadiriya." I looked in, obviously, once I came back to the UK, I was hectic to, frantically search a lot more. And I realized that it wasn't actually his name, but a given name from the order that he belonged to. So I have learned a lot about my own roots, which I didn't really realize. And I was also, of course, what drew me to the name Qadri initially also was that I found a map of Lord Kitchener when the British came to Cyprus in 1882. And there were stories from my grandparents that Mehmet Qadri was given quite a lot of land for his services around the Nicosia-Larnaca road. And again, I thought, well, I don't know, it's just family stories. However, Lord Kitchener did have a small post next to the main road named Kadrini.
Wow.
So the English version was, the Greek version is Kadrini, yes? So he just added the Kadri, and that actually aroused my attention more. And when I found the 1833 census, property census, the family alone and his 3 sons owned over 200 dönums of land. Wow. And they started a lot of vineyards, which Lurigina was well known for. In fact, in Greek, they called it Stafiliohorho. It means vine village. That was a nickname. So I was absolutely amazed. And at that particular time in 1833, the whole property ownership of the Muslims in Lurigina was only 1,200 dönums. So for one family of 4 to have 200 dönums, it must have been a quite well-off family.
Maybe even considered as Aga of the village.
Well, there was Agas in the village because his son was Yusuf Aga, and he became the first mayor of the village. Yes, you're right. It's amazing how one conversation brings another one. Exactly. And there was a story with Yusuf Aga that there was Albanian soldiers stationed at that time, and they were quite rough, actually, apparently. And he actually put them to rights, and then other soldiers, etc., came to the village, one of which was Arabic roots. And I found many census information of the early 18 to mid 18 that were changed over from Albanian troops to Egyptian troops, because apparently they were more amenable to the local population. And if you look in Karpazny, Kalepurny and all that, you will see Mısır Askeri. You can see this in the National Archives a lot. And one of my, as I said, my father's paternal roots are from Arabic origin, and they were feudal cavalrymen, and they also owned quite a lot of land as well.
And these cavalrymen, were they Sipahi?
They were Sipahis, yes. That's what was recorded in the Ottoman census. And I actually checked with the National Archives translator to confirm, is this just a nickname or no? She said there's no way anyone would have been given a nickname Sipahi in 1831 unless they were Sipahis. They were actually Sipahis. And when you check the land ownership of the 1833 property census, you can easily see that they were very well off. Yeah.
This is all really interesting stuff. We're going to have to go on a short break, but I can't wait to go back and learn some more of your valuable information.
Thank you.
So we'll see you straight after the break. Welcome back, and we have our valuable guest here, Ismail Veli Bey, and he was discussing about his village and the origins of the Lurigina people. You mentioned about how prior to your research there was many myths regarding their origins, saying that they came from Latin roots or perhaps Greek roots because they speak Greek. But in actuality, and you'll be able to evidence that with your research as well, their roots stem from, you mentioned, Kavaz, Ottoman guards, Sipahis, cavalrymen. You even mentioned Qadri, which is a religious order. So it was quite the opposite from what you're telling us. And it's fascinating for me that the notion that Turks who perhaps bear fair skin or maybe speak a different language are somehow of Italian stock, as if Italy is a hub of Scandinavian-looking people. And adding to that, we have Turkish people from Anatolia, the Balkans, and the Caucasus who have blue eyes and fair skin. So, I mean, for me, that indicates some sort of inferiority complex within our community, perhaps inherited from the shackles of British colonialism. But that's just my kind of observation of it. Why do you think we are coming up with these false notions without any evidence to back them up?
Well, sadly, the last 200 years has been written by Western propaganda against Ottomanism and depicting Turks as somehow as a subhuman, barbaric people. Now, at the end of the day, we know for a fact that the many Kurds and Turkish tribes also are very fair hair and so on. We also know that Russians also, I mean, are fair people. That doesn't mean they're Italian. And not everybody originates from Italy. In fact, the Italians themselves, I believe, come from a multitude of different ethnic groups dating back to the Roman Empire. In fact, they had, Rome itself had 30 different suburas, which is suburbs of Rome, that actually had different ethnic groups, and each senator was vying for their attention during the election. So that puts that one to rest. Now, obviously, DNA and family roots and tree is a completely different order. We know for a fact that the Ottomans were a very fluid society. Yes. They moved around quite a bit depending on their status and in order to better themselves. And they had no reservations about marrying, like men marrying women from other faiths. Having said that, we also noticed that many Greeks, Italians, and English are also from other ethnic groups. However, as I identify myself today, I'm proud of my Turkish Cypriot heritage and of my roots. I've come to understand a lot more. And if we see our positives rather than worrying about the negatives that others are trying to depict us as, then I think we will come to the conclusion that we are no worse and no better than anybody else. But unfortunately, we know for a fact that every time something goes bad, there's the Turks again. And we need to actually get rid of that chip off our shoulder as well. And I actually spoke to a young man one day. He was actually from part of my roots, and he changed his name, not officially, but his Facebook name to an Italian name. And I said, how come you do that? You don't want people to know? He said, well, I've been leading a false life all my life. I've been Italian and part Ethiopian, but because I've got Latin DNA in me, or South Italian, whatever he called it. I don't know what. I don't remember exactly. Oh, yes, I do, actually. He said that. I said, well, where's your family in Italy from? He said, Ostia. I said, okay, did you actually contact them? He said, no, I don't know who they are. I said, well, have you actually bothered to do any further advances on DNA to find out where the people from Ostia came from? Because as far as I know, people around Rome and north, the Etruscans came from Anatolia initially as well. That's from the Trojans, which is something, and he was completely shocked by that. And this has been proven by DNA too. And I said, well, what about your Ethiopian roots? Have you actually found out what's the name? If you're going to change your name to that. He said, well, I don't really know anything. I said, well, are you aware there's over 90 ethnic groups in Ethiopia? So which one do you belong to? And he said, no, I don't. I said, so really, your name again is not real, I said. So you're trying to give yourself a new name by being ashamed of your Turkish name, but you don't know the names of your other roots. So what kind of a life is that? I mean, you have to identify with what you are today. It's same as Muhammad Ali. Yeah. He's a American, African originally. Many African Americans now. Are we going to tell them they are not Americans simply because they originally came from Africa? And we could go on forever with that one. Our DNA is what it is. And we also know that South Italians originated from Arabs. The citrus crops in Sicily were all brought in by the Arab Saracens and the Moors and so on, as same as in South Spain. Are the Italians now going to say, no, I'm not Italian, I'm now Arabic? It just doesn't quite work that way to me. All I know is that we have to be proud of who and what we are. And you are, as an individual, should be a little ambassador for your own community. And as I said before, and promote your own culture in a positive light. And if there is anything negative, don't hide it, admit it. Because by admitting it, people respect you all the more. But you don't have to slag off other communities in order to promote your own culture. Far from it. Or you should concentrate, say, this is my roots, this is my heritage, and I'm proud of it. And if you don't accept it, then that's your problem. It's not mine.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And I mean, this notion of a pure race doesn't even exist. I mean, ethnicity is very fluid. Greeks are mixed, Turks are mixed, English, I mean, they come from Germanic people, from the Normans and so on. But ethnicity, as opposed to, you could have, I mean, if we take Cyprus as an example, a person with black skin, fair skin, tan skin, but no one can say that they're not Turkish, because we share the common heritage, our history, our language, our culture is all the same.
I agree. In fact, telling somebody because they're originally African or Italian, also that they're not Turkish Cypriot and they are there, is a bit of an insult, in my opinion. It's like telling me I'm not British now, although I'm not ethnically English. If they say, no, you're not British because you're Turkish Cypriot, then I would equally be insulted.
Of course.
And it goes round and round. The English are not a pure race. As you said, there is no such thing. Hitler thought he was for a pure race, and he wasn't. One conversation brings another, and I don't want to digress, but his actual nephew was a British-born English citizen. And they wouldn't even take him in the army simply because he had the name that Hitler had, the surname. So finally, he went to America. I'm going to cut this short. He appealed to Roosevelt. They checked him out, found that he was actually against the Nazis. He became an American soldier, was discharged with honors after the Second World War. And after the genocide came into knowledge, he decided that he couldn't no longer sustain the Hitler name. And he actually decided to take a new name because of other people's misconceptions. Having the same name does not make you a criminal. Neither does having the same culture as somebody who's a murderer. If anybody comes and tells me that they haven't, as soon as there's a rape inflicted on somebody or a terrorist, they're either Muslims or so and so, because people have these misconceptions. I'm sorry, but even our relatives, every single one of our relatives is not pure. Some of them can break a law and some of them cannot. This is the same of society. We need to respect people for what they are and who they believe themselves to be in, and not who we think they should be.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And that actually links into my next question, actually, as well as something you said earlier regarding you had relatives in the Greek side who actually have Turkish heritage and are now, due to a Christianization process, are now considered Greek Cypriot. So regarding this kind of missionary activities, were there a lot of Greek missionary activities in Lurigina to convert the Turks to Christianity?
Yes, there was actually. There was a very famous event in 1924 when the local priest was actually murdered for his Christianization policies. And I'm not condoning that murder because it was vicious. And I actually went over the court excerpts and read every single page, and I was quite shocked at how vicious it was. See, if we believed in ourselves and our heritage, we don't need no fear of anybody trying to convert us to anything that they want. I can only convert myself if I wish to do so. However, the priest was actually emboldened by a plebiscite done in the whole of Cyprus and in Lurigina in 1921, because it was 100 years of Greek struggle, beginning of the struggle for Greek independence from Ottomans. And the Greek army was advancing onto Ankara at that time in Anatolia, and he was emboldened by trying to Christianize the Turkish Cypriots who spoke very good Greek in Lurigina, because he thought, well, that's it, it's a great chance for me to, and there was promises of land and wealth, and a few of them, we managed to succeed, a few of them, and a committee was formed up, and they set themselves and said, we're going to get rid of this guy. But then they decided to kill him, and sadly, because they were actually belonging to the higher members of the village, they actually blamed it on two young disabled people, one of which was one blind in one eye, the other was crippled in the other eye. And they actually ended up hanging two innocents as a result. And one of the perpetrators did actually confess this in the night, just before he died in night. I can't give his name because unless I actually have it all in writing, it's not really fair to give names, although the whole village practically knows who they were. He was actually a witness in the court as well. He explained how the priest was killed, but he said he had nothing to do with it. So you can come to your own conclusion on that one. But also I have a relative from the Kavaz family whose father was a corporal in the British police force at that time, and before he died, he told her how guilty he was that he kept his mouth shut. But he said, I couldn't really do nothing in 1924. At that time, I was just a small corporal, and I knew who the perpetrators were. So yes, I've actually spoken to the priest's grandson subsequently to get their version of the story. So yes, there was a Christianization policy, which was quite common in most Christian countries, because when you go to many other countries across the world, many countries have been decimated by the missionary thing.
Well, it's interesting that the motivation behind the priest's missionary activities wasn't spiritual or religious in any way. It was rather political, to turn Cyprus into a Greek island. So him actually going to Lurigina wasn't to save the souls of these Turks. It was more to just convert them, to raise the numbers of the Greeks in the island.
Well, that's true. I mean, I know you're going to find this strange, but even in the UK, 1970s, I was working with Greek Cypriots, and quite a few of them were insisting I marry a Greek girl and they could put a deposit on a house, get me a house and convert me to Christianity. I said, no, if I'm going to meet a Maria or a Stavroula and I'm going to fall in love with her, it would be for who she is and not because I'm going to, no, you can't do that, you can't. I said, I'm not going to ask her to convert. So this was in 1970s. You can imagine the conditions prevailing in the early part of the last century, how people actually believed. I used to speak to many Greek, I speak Greek very well actually, and many of them were actually in an attempt to try and Christianize many Turkish Cypriots. So sadly, it's a fact of life, and sometimes it turns quite brutal as it did in 1924. But all I can say is that, we have to believe in ourselves, who we are and what we are, and not bother with what other people think we are.
Exactly. And just to kind of add weight to everything that you've been saying, could you just give us a sample of your findings through the primary sources here, just so that the viewers can see, and the effort as well. I mean, it's 10 years worth of work. It's like 5 parts here. I mean, it's all pretty hefty.
Yes, there's 5 volumes here. The first one is on history, which has been translated from many documents. Yes, that's the first part, which has been translated from many documents, and it's all sourced. It's all footnotes, the cultural life, when the mosque was built in the village, when they came, how they came, even going back to 1572, how many olive groves there were in the village, how much land there was and ownership, going right through to the 1600s. And another page which is touching on the priest murder, which is the plebiscite of 1921 to commemorate or celebrate the Greek start of the War of Independence. And the second part of it also goes on to the family trees, which are recorded, which is, as I said earlier, over 8,000 people from many different family trees. And this is all done as a result of the Ottoman archive information, which I acquired, not just in Kyrenia. This is all Ottoman script of the 1879 and 1831 and 1833 census, in addition to other censuses dating from 1572, which were not always about individuals, but the oldest individuals roots are found of our village was actually Greeks of 1672, but not the Muslims. But these have all been translated, and some of the information cannot be found in Cyprus. So I obviously had to get it from Istanbul, and some from the Greek National Archives as well.
That's amazing. And in addition, you've also been very busy recently supporting families and members of the Turkish Cypriot community who are currently residing in the neighbouring Arab countries and reconnecting them with their families in Cyprus. Could you just briefly tell us a bit about those support you've been offering?
Well, I think these originally they're actually Lebanese and Palestinian. They came across my website because they're researching for their own Cypriot roots. So they came across my website and they decided to write to me how they can actually search for their birth certificates, etc., of their grandparents. In fact, one of them, Nariman al-Namari, who's Palestinian origin, living in Jordan as a refugee herself, her grandmother was actually born in Lefkosha. And unfortunately, when she went to Cyprus, they wouldn't give her access to her grandparents' birth certificates simply because they were dead. I mean, let's face it, in the UK, you can go to the National Archives and the most critical cases, which is murder trials, not to affect the families involved, is usually released after 100 years. Well, if they are reputed to be over 3,000 Turkish Cypriot women who were actually married to Arabs in the 30s and 40s, which may have accumulated 30, 40,000, I don't know how many, obviously, it's pure conjecture and speculative. But we need to win these people over. We need to help them. We need to open our archives to young people, even in the UK. My grandson, if he was to go to Cyprus and say, where's my grandparents' birth certificate because I want to search for my roots, they wouldn't give it to him. No. How are future generations going to connect to their roots? That's one of the reasons why I wanted to do it myself for my future grandchildren. And I actually would like to invite at least one member of every Turkish Cypriot family to go to the National Archives in Cyprus and also lobby their MPs out there or muhtars, whatever, in order to pressure the government to open the archives for people to search for their roots. We can win people over that way. We can actually get people to connect to their roots and have an influx of tourism simply searching for their roots. When I was in Italy, I was shocked to find how many American Italians actually came after 100 years searching for their families. This is just an example. And the way we are shutting the doors and making it very bureaucratic simply means that when Nariman cannot find her grandparents' documents and connect to her roots, she will tell many members of her family and friends, and they won't actually endeavour to go through that process. I think it's a shame.
It is a real shame. It is a real shame. Just to kind of finally wrap up, you mentioned you have a website. Could you tell us the address of the website for those who may be interested?
Yes, it's www.familiesoflurigina.moonfruit.com. However, simply Googling families of Lurigina, it would come up.
It will come up.
It will come up because there's a massive traffic to the site.
Yeah. Ismail, we could go on forever with this. It's really interesting and it's very important. I recommend all our viewers to visit Ismail Bey's website, and we're going to have to cut it short. I can't thank you enough, really. It's been a very exciting show, and to our viewers, we'll see you in our next episode with another exciting edition exploring our history. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.